Let's talk a little bit about draws in cEDH because we're seeing them a lot lately, and I'm seeing that there is a path to deal with them that you should know about. Okay, we play an unusual list over here on cEDH Unhinged, and it doesn't have much traditional interaction. So, how do we account for that? We have redundancy. So, you hit one of my pieces, I got another one in hand, I'll play a replacement. That's one way to deal with that. The other way we deal with that is with protection. We're going to run Diversion Unit. We're going to run Spellskite. We are going to run Nurok Stealth Suit. We'll run some Swiftfoot Boots. We'll have a pair of Lightning Greaves in there. And that's all to make sure that Urza doesn't get removed. But it still does. We also have a Fierce. We've got a Misstep. And we've got... what's the other one that I got in there? A good old Mana Drain. But that's mostly for getting mana, to be honest. It's mostly a ritual, I guess, a delayed ritual than anything for our purposes. However, my point is that there's a lot of draws going around because there's a lot of interaction going around, and it's really hard to win. And even though I'm building a whole bunch of resiliency into this thing, all that seems to do is push me to a point where I can present the win, but I can't protect it. It's an interesting position to be in. But if we leverage that, we can take that impending loss because we can't push our win through anymore. We can take that impending loss and turn it into a draw. How do we do that? Well, we need to identify other players at the table who also want to draw. As soon as we figure out we're not going to win, we need to pivot to the draw. If I create a graph, I will show it to you now. I'm not going to do that. I'm lazy. Okay, so envision two lines, all right? And it's basically the line of progression over time throughout the game. And that line diverts at a certain point over that progression and pivots towards a draw. Let's say that the typical game follows the progression. I'm playing for the win. I'm playing for the win. I'm playing for the win. The win's on the stack. Now I'm playing for the draw. That's the typical progression. Let's take the other extreme. Let's take, for example, a player that's in seat 4. They go to 5 cards. They get a control hand. They're against some known shredders. And they just say, you know what, I'm going to follow another line that starts from playing for the draw, playing for the draw, playing for the draw, and then pivots when there's a window towards playing for the win. That's basically two methods of playing your deck that you should be familiar with. Playing for the win, playing for the draw. There are appropriate situations for both. Now that we've gone over like that, just required prerequisite information, let's go over, again, some other techniques to induce draws. One more prerequisite piece of information for us is, where do we get points, guys? Where do we get points, everybody, in cEDH? We get them in wins. And we get them where else? Avoiding losses. That's where else we get them. Not losing. So however you count the points in your particular situation. I'm in a league that I'm referencing right now where a loss loses you a point. You start at 100 standard points. A loss loses you a point. And I believe a win is 3 or 5. I don't know. I get so few of them that I couldn't tell you. And then a draw, I think, is neutral. Or maybe it's 1 point. I don't know. I think it's just neutral in our league, but it could be a situation where you're in a cEDH tournament and it's very typical that a draw is 1 point for everybody and a win is 3 points or 5 points, something like that. It varies tournament to tournament, and losses are typically no points rather than a loss in points. But the overall principle of there being only so many available points throughout a certain series of games, and the overall chances of you winning a game, if you're a good player and you're playing against another couple of, another trio of just respectable players, you're coming out over a extended period of time with something like that 25% win rate. Adjust for, circumstances, the rock, paper, scissors of the game and all of the stuff, how the nuances of the politics shake out between that crew, all those things affect the win rate. But ceteris paribus, all things being equal, 25%. I think that I ranted quite a bit about me being upset about that number as a target to shoot for, because it shouldn't be, but it is a baseline that we can work against, again, with that all things being equal principle. So where are we getting points when we're playing here? You get them in the wins. You get them in not losing. That's the other one. It's avoiding the loss. So let's take a hypothetical where over an extended period of time, we have players that have three options available to them going into the game. It's a loss, a draw, and a win. We pivot towards a game plan where our baseline is just draw, and after that, the only other thing that we do is win, and we cut the losses out altogether. That sounds pretty nice, right? Well, we can't necessarily achieve that perfectly. Not that I've tried, but we can get closer, right? So we have a couple of different competing things, right? So what we don't want to do is overdo it and be like, I'm going to build my deck so heavy on control and in trying to induce this draw that I'm leaving wins that I otherwise could have on the table through deck building, redundancy, or adages that just don't need to be there. So we don't want to reduce our overall win rate, but what we want to do is find a win rate cap, right? So I'm going to play in a particular environment and find, a really great win rate. And then at that point, I'm going to try and lock that in and then reduce the number of losses. And what you'll find is that as you do that, your win rate also goes down a little bit. But there is a balance, right? Where the points that you lose consistently to losses that otherwise could be draws are offset by the wins that you leave on the table through achieving that process. However, I find that on balance, you can adjust your play style that we mentioned earlier, learned that skill, when to play for the win and when to pivot for the draw, and you can come out with a deficit on the points side when you are a little bit more conservative and take draws every once in a while that you maybe didn't have to when there was a window for you to win, but that's the leverage that you have in order to make the draw. Do you really think that you can make it through? How many times does it happen that, you know what, there's a 20% chance that I can make this thing through? Well, there's an 80% chance that you don't get through, you get an L, and you would have been better off with the draw. So my philosophy is we politic those draws, and we're going to teach you how. I mentioned that scenario before where basically you're in a spot where you can present the win, but you can't back it up, and we leverage that in order to achieve a victory. So let's talk about that just a little bit more before we let that scenario go, because it is a thing that happens to me all the time. And the number one obstacle in order to achieving it is leveraging the other people at the table in such a way that they realize it's also in their best interest. It's the politics of it, of course. So basically, how do I avoid being like, okay, I'm going to put this win on the stack, and if you use your piece of interaction and play to your outs, because you have a 0.0 whatever percent chance of winning, right? If you stop me here, you're just pitching it to that guy. It's kind of kingmakey. So how about instead, you hold that piece of interaction. I put the win on the stack. If anybody fights it, you use that interaction against them. And once the win is secured, I'll offer everybody the draw. That's how we politic that. That's how we do that. And the thing is, it's effective. It's consistent. It happens regularly. I'm forced to do it because of the play style of this deck. It wasn't intentional. It's just the best option available after I've been, just smacked in the face over and over because people are threat assessing me properly, which is good on them. But my point about the draw in that style is that if you just know that it's an option, because I just told you, and you try to achieve it, what you've already done is taken a lot of the section of your losses and turn them into draws. Because like I said, the biggest obstacle is not card related, it's politics related. It's just letting everybody know that it is an option that happens to be in their best interest. Be like, hey, dude, if you stop this right here, that person's just going to go off. Or maybe they don't. Maybe I do get another rotation. Who knows? Most likely you don't get another rotation. Most likely that dude staying silent in the corner is going to pop off. The one that's not in the conversation, he's the scary one, right? And so I take the draw. I just do. and then I try and again kind of play from that baseline of not losing, and then take the points where I get them. And this is a new philosophy. I don't have like the 8% win rate bottom of the league because I've been doing this the whole time. This is like me adjusting to that scenario, right? But let's talk about that 8% win rate a little bit. Again, 75% chance of loss when you're going into this thing. So you imagine that you're going to have a win rate something like 25% if you play an extended period of time and come out. But I'm here to tell you, like, that's not the case because I don't know how it exactly figures out your win percentage and it incorporates the draws into it. Because, like, I'm over here, like, I might play 10 games, draw 8 of them, lose 2, and having whiffed like 3 or 4 times just because, I'm not playing well in between. It's happened, and that's how we get better, right? And result in 8% win rate, right? It's like, how do we get to those games? We'll talk about that in a second. But how does it incorporate like the performance of me inducing those draws when they otherwise would have been losses? It's like it doesn't really measure that. I feel like that's a really good skill that isn't represented in the data. But let's talk about my 8% win rate, because that's why are you over here listening to some dude with an 8% win rate? Okay, let's justify that. It's worth doing. Okay, so if you play in a closed environment for a long time against people that know what they're doing, the nature of the game is that 3 people working together will consistently be able to stop the other guy. Right? That just is what it is. Especially if from the beginning we know, hey, this guy plays a deck that is going to consistently put out win conditions, without fail, in a particular manner. It's like, is it a predictable play style? It's like, I will admit it is, but why am I confident that I will go into a league game and likely lose, but I would go into a tournament and win? Well, we can take the whole surprise I'm playing Storm Urza factor out. Let's just assume that these people in the tournament know that I'm playing a Storm Urza variant and I'm not playing the traditional control style. So I'm not relying on surprise from that aspect. What I don't anticipate happening in the tournament setting that I am seeing inside of the league is directly related to the social aspect of the game that you need to be able to identify and then separate from the other parts of your play, because there is a discrepancy between tournament play and every other kind of game. Now, what are we actually competing for when we are playing any other kind of game than a tournament game? Well, we're playing for respect and social standing among your play group. That's what I would argue is actually the number one currency. If you lose every single game, but you get the most respect at the table, that's a good Saturday spent. And there are many times when you see that is how it pans out. And why is it that way? How is it that way? So let's take me, who is a known quantity and goes into this social situation where everybody knows and has the sense of foreboding going into it that I'm going to deploy, really quickly, and they're going to have to, they're forced to work together in order to stop me. It's like, that's a situation that they can achieve and do achieve, resulting in 8% win rate. Do I expect that to exist in a tournament setting? Well, sometimes it will. At the top tables, many of you are shouting like, yes, they're going to threat assess you correctly and all that. Sure, and absolutely. However, let's take a couple of these social dynamics and then lay them on to actual scenarios. So no, let's be more abstract for a moment. Sorry, I got you with a bait and switch again there. We got a monologue for another little bit about this. So the social currency is respect. We sit down at the table, and I've got my particular Urza variant, and there's 3 other people that have conventional decks, whatever you want to describe those as. Any combination of turbo, mid-range, whatever. It doesn't really matter what they're playing at that point. But they're not going to have like the new guy on the block with the scary deck get away with winning all of these games when the counter to that consistently and reliably is just working together in order to remove particular critical pieces over and over. It's like, that works, and that's fine. Okay, so why? It sounds like I'm just whining, but I promise I'm getting to a point here. The reason why it's so consistent is that the number one mistake socially that people want to avoid while they're playing a game that's outside of a tournament is being in the position after the game to have somebody that they respect, which is likely somebody that they're playing with. It's a play group outside of a tournament. They likely respect these people. What they fear is having one of those people say, you and I both knew that Urza deck was scary and that he was going to win, and you should have used that thing on him. And I told you should have done that, and you knew that, and I knew that, and he was telling you that too. We knew before this that was going to be a problem, and we're all working together, and you're breaking the social contract by not diverting your resources that direction consistently. Now that's what they want to avoid, right? They don't want to be in that position. What is the likelihood that they're actually going to be in that position? Pretty low, so you don't see it that often because they avoid it, right? So it's not like a thing that you'd be like, oh, I've seen that before, or I see that all the time. You might have seen it once or twice, right? But the feeling of not wanting to be in that position, I'm sure you can identify with, or at least I can, where you're like, geez, there's this new guy that went and tuned his list, had some success, is coming back, sitting down, and then wins a couple of games, and then the table looks at each other like, okay, listen, all we need to do in order to stop that is this and that, and then that person comes in, puts out, win attempt, and they're forced to, put stuff out, and that's the game dynamic. And this person doesn't win, they suck up all the oxygen in the room, they take all the interaction, and one of these guys wins. But ultimately everything balances, right? Like everything like hits an equilibrium. So every time, okay, let me get to the actual, okay, that I'm getting ahead of myself. So let's draw some analogies and real game scenarios up. So basically, I run a top deck casting strategy, and it combines with Urza, right? But both of those are pretty mana intensive. And it's not that the two of them just by themselves win. They're the main components. They also need a supporting cast of characters, reducers, producers, mana reducers, and artifact producers. Whenever I cast things, the stuff that gets more value out of the deck when I have these cast triggers happen. Okay, so it's not just an A-B combo. It's not Basalt and Power Artifact, although I do have the ability to do that, which is always scary and a thing that they politic about, I promise you. The A-B combo, it's most likely not present. I don't run a lot of tutors. You shouldn't really be afraid of it. But I get politicked as if when I play the Mystic Forge, when I play the Urza, either individual piece, that, one half of the combo has been assembled and it must be answered immediately, otherwise we will lose. Now, can I politic myself out of that position? Be like, listen, I know I have Urza, but not really, because it's like there's been enough times where they do ignore it that I do end up getting away with it and winning, and it just happens like that, But that doesn't happen often enough to warrant the amount of preemptive interaction that, and I would argue that it's preemptive, that in analogous scenarios would not be leveled against other players. Now, what do I mean by that? So basically, I argue via conventional game theory that you should use your interaction at the last possible moment because you're revealing that information at the last possible moment and depriving that, from your opponents, right? And there's tangential reasons, but you just do what you can at the last moment while retaining its effectiveness, right? Why would you do stuff now that you could do later if it doesn't cost you anything? You wouldn't, so you don't. Oh, geez, I just totally lost my train of thought. Okay, so I argue that you should do that later. Okay, there we go. All right, so basically, other players will make analogous plays that are similar to me casting an Urza or a Mystic Forge. I don't have the other supporting cast of characters. There's some other things. I'm gonna need another turn. I got to put some stuff together. I got 2 cards in hand. It's not in here. That kind of thing. So they're in that scenario, and according to that game theory, they're not inclined to use their interaction, right? They're socially, if they use interaction right there in an analogous scenario, it's not me, they lose social standing because people are like, why are you just popping off, on that? You should save it for the more important thing that's surely to come down the pipe later. Just wait for the win to be on the stack and save it for that. That makes sense. But the social dynamic is such that politics will be made where people will divert their game plan using 4 to 7 mana, pitching cards, doing this, doing that, using resources, and cutting deals with the other players to be like, all right, I'm going to drop a small nuke on Urza's board, or I'm going to, a whir of invention for, a pithing needle or something like that. I'm gonna go like out of my way using resources with the understanding with the other players that you will not bowmaster anything on my board, or you will not do any of this or that. So there's like deals that are made in order to drop nukes, and the other players like don't affect me. Like that's a logical and effective way to deal with my game plan, and I applaud them for figuring that out. I also think that's one of those dynamics that will not exist in the tournament scene. Is it plausible that it could exist? Are all the pieces there? Yes. Do I think that they're going to be able to coordinate that given all of the, um, the fact, just all of the different factors inside of that tournament scenario? I don't think they're going to be able to politic that. I don't think they're going to be able to threat assess, come to agreement, not run, overtime, be like, hey, judge, can I get this guy to make a game action? Like, I don't think they're going to be able to do that. But they are here. So there are scenarios where it's like, I'm going to divert game plan. I'm going to drop a small nuke on Urza's board. You guys aren't going to mess with me. And at the end of the game, what they've done is given themselves an out and say, well, even though I lost, I had to do it because otherwise Urza would have won, right, guys? And you got the win, and that doesn't feel that bad. So it's like those respect points that they were trying to get, the social standing, they guarantee it at the beginning of the game by getting me at the knees, and they cash out on it at the end. And if they win by somehow, after having diverted those resources, then it feels extra good. But honestly, that rarely happens. But let's get back to that equilibrium. So that player gets me at the knees. Another person wins. Hey, but I had to get Urza, guys, right? Yeah, pat on the back. That's just how that goes. Maybe even they blame me. Why are you so scary? But at a certain point, the equilibrium is hit where I'm like, dude, I'm just playing Urza and I have nothing else. I'm not being scary. And the pat on the back after the game, when you're like, well, we had to, guys, just it gets you just a little bit less credit every time. And then suddenly the other person has won enough because you've been beating up over here on the guy with the new spicy deck. And the other guy's won enough that suddenly the social shift changes. And it doesn't go to this guy's the new boogeyman, but it achieves some sense of neutrality. So what I'm describing right now isn't like an overall experience that you can expect from a league like this, but it is an interesting dynamic that happens to players that have a little hint of success. And what happened was I tuned my list, and it didn't work, and it didn't work, and it didn't work. And I lost, and I lost, and I lost, just due to natural things. And then it worked, and then I won, and I won, and I won. And then people figured it out, and now I'm in the losing again. And eventually there will be social equilibriums and whatnot that'll bring that win rate up. And there will be me figuring out how to play against three players and at least, attempt that. Again, it's hard in cEDH to be like three guys threat assessing me properly. I have a board state based, readable cEDH deck. And so I can, three good pilots that know what they're looking at can navigate this correctly. It's like, absolutely, I can learn how to become resilient against that. And I am. And ultimately, at the end of the process, when I go to a tournament, the consensus is I will shred. And that, so 8% win rate, whatever. The ones that I actually care about, I will be extremely prepared for all the reasons that I just told you. Okay, so do I have a way to like wrap that up? Did I hit all the final points? Do you have any questions where you're sitting here like, dude, you just like rambled and you didn't quite hit that? I got some feedback the other day. I don't think so is the way I'll wrap that up. I don't think so. I think I hit everything. But I got some feedback the other day about these videos. I'm going to do just a little bit like housekeeping here stuff about the channel. I got some feedback that like somebody was just like, this video goes absolutely nowhere. And sorry, that's just the reality of the situation. Is I bring up these things like when I have something to say and I think out loud, and I just want you guys to be here for the thoughts because I think they're reasonably valuable, and I want to be able to go back. Maybe I never watch my own videos, but maybe eventually I'll be like, you know what, I talked about that, and I really want to at least hear my own thoughts one more time so I can have a place to pick up from, and then incorporate whatever made me think about it, and then maybe have a new perspective and come back and make a new video for you guys, because it's an ever-changing nature of how we view this game. The only thing that makes you different from the next player that's playing the same list as you is like your perspective on the game. It's just like how you view it. That's it. And you need to leverage the way that you view the game because it's personal to you in such a way that's to your strengths. And you can, it's kind of odd right now because I'm like in the Urza Discord, and like the archetype of person that plays Urza and wants to stacks and like is mid-rangey and controlly and meticulous and like very by the book and like knows all the stuff, like that's just kind of like what I find there. Those guys like, I'm just like meathead turbo guy, like herder, like playing solitaire over here, with no interaction on the stack. People are just like skip past me, like, do you got anything? And I'm, like they don't ask me that. So it, which also gives me like an aura of just like, people think I'm dumb, bro. People think I'm just like dumb. People like, and so the thing is like, there's no way to combine like herder play style with 8% win rate, and mix in a couple of misplays and then not being present with the stack interaction, and then just be like not the typical kind of nerds that we're dealing with, which I've got some bones to pick with us nerds. I'm in the crowd, but I'm not like looking like a nerd most of the time. And so I'm kind of like viewed as an extreme outsider in that space in a lot of ways. And, and that's fine. And in a lot of ways, I'm kind of like a guest, but I take it so seriously that it's like, I've earned my spot. Right. But at the same time, it's like, I've got that aura of people looking at me like, bro, like the way that you politic, the way that you make decisions. It's like, why are you like the other day, yesterday, the last game that I played, um, I got blown out. People just like, they just tossed the early interaction at me. I couldn't get my feet underneath me. It wasn't like I was a threat at any point. They just didn't let it get to that level. And then I'm like, at a certain point, I've played everything in my hand. I'm like, the only thing I got is this defense grid. And I said, all right, and the last turn, I got a Helm of Awakening on there too. So it's like, and I'm like, all right, so you guys get this Helm of Awakening, and last thing I'm gonna do, last mana tapping out, I'm gonna cast this defense grid for one. And what my logic was, everybody else is going to deploy. Somebody's going to win. But now everybody who's uncertain about their game plan and their ability to win relative to the other three players' ability to win, they're not worrying about me anymore. The other two players' ability to win, I suppose. They're worrying about their ability to win relative to those two players, and instead, because there's this defense grid, pivot their game plan to holding up 4 mana for a piece of interaction and the ability to deploy it, and it resulted in a draw, and it was pretty cool for me. I liked that. It worked. But afterward, somebody asked like, why'd you do that? And it's like, like the comment that got was like, well, you're really lucky I had 4 to pay for that, whatever. And there was another moment, again, when did I talk about mana draining the flood caller? Yeah, like where I was explaining, because it's kind of the same explanation to both of them, where I don't think I talked about mana draining the flood caller with you guys. We'll go over that later. Okay, it's like, yeah, I gambled that you were gonna pay 4 and be able to induce the draw because you weren't able to deploy your own board state, but I was already going to lose. Like, I converted a loss into a draw and avoided losing a point, via a defense grid when I was already blown out. Like, that's pretty dope. Anyways, so be looking for those opportunities. All right, housekeeping stuff. Yeah, you're going to be viewed as a dumbass if you watch my channel and you do anything that I'm doing, so be prepared for that. But you will go to tournaments and you will shred. You'll have a unique list that nobody else is really playing that works. It's not like a gimmick either. It's one of those things where it's just like, if you have 2 people working against you and they have pretty good interaction packages, you're just probably going to get through over the top, or the other turbo deck is going to win. If you have, it's like, it's not a gimmick, guys. It just works. I happen to be in a particular area, and where I'm against heavy control able, control capable decks. We're not against like some Kyrix and Dahadas all the time. They're there, at least Dahada is. But the other, I got the hiccups. Okay, turbo guys, what am I actually trying to get to? Geez, I'm ruining this video right now. It's not a gimmick because there are many scenarios in which the deck is super strong, and there's a rock paper scissors games with the types of decks at the table in which this is very strong. I'm not in one of those right now, and it's combined with, again, social situations which create unfavorable scenarios. So it's like I'm trying to justify why you guys should be listening to me, I guess, is ultimately what I'm trying to do right now. And I don't have a great answer for you. You're going to have faith that my 8% win rate is not like an indication that I am just straight garbage, which most of the time I would see an 8% win rate and be like, that dude's straight garbage. But anyways, it is what it is. Okay, so housekeeping stuff. I'm going to be out in Vegas for the Magic Con out there June 20th. So I'm hoping to meet up with some of you guys there. However many people are watching this video, if you're going to be there, let me know. Hop into the Urza Discord. If you go into the comments, there's going to be a link to my particular deck list page where you can speak with me and all the other people that are doing this thing. I promise there's not just me out there. Other people are playing this list and having success with it. You can come and talk with them down there, and you can also coordinate with me about meeting up in Vegas. What's unfortunate right now is that in Vegas, for this particular event, there's going to be some of the best cEDH players in the world, and there's not going to be a real tournament for them to compete at because we're still in this interim period where the ownership of the format is being transferred over from that third party that totally collapsed because it sucked over to the Wizards of the Coast, who hasn't figured out what they want to do with it yet and just recognize cEDH isn't even a thing. I think they just said the word cEDH in an official release, like not just a couple of months ago, because they got Gavin up there representing us. I don't know much about him. I have a lot of faith in him, or I'm at least like hoping that he can be trusted in order to, steward us, shepherd us through these turbulent times, because ultimately he can make or break this thing. But they don't have in Vegas a tournament for us to go to. They have like a one elimination round, everybody kind of compete thing. That sucks. The issue that I'm running into is like, okay, let's say that I take a whole bunch of these players and like, let's have our own little tournament thing. It'll take this long. We'll do it on this day, whatever. Where do we actually go? The problem is at the tournament venue, there's going to be me taking a whole bunch of players, having my own little event thing, and then diverting them away from their paid events. How are the organizers going to feel about that? Probably not good. And then I take a whole bunch of prime age spending males into a casino hotel that I'll be staying at, and we play some kind of tournament structured card game in their hotel. I doubt they'll like that either, and I doubt they'll believe us when we tell them that they're not playing for any prize and that it's all legal. They'll be like, okay, so who's your bookie and what's going on here? I doubt they'll like that very much. They'll say, get on the floor if you want to play a card game, and you can gamble all you want. So I don't think that that's a thing that I have figured out yet. If anybody has any suggestions for how to make that happen, let me know. I think the worst case scenario is we just grab 4 or 8 of us and go and play in the lobby of one of the hotels or something like that. I don't know. We'll figure it out. But my point is I want to have an actual couple of games with some of the other shredders that are going to be out in Vegas. That's why I'm going. I want to network and shoot some videos. So I'll have some cool player interviews for you guys to consume from that. I'll do a little bit of like the walk around vlogging stuff. If you're interested in that, I'll edit it a little bit, but not a lot. So it'll mostly be just like, you can scrub through a little bit and see the portions that are interesting to you. But just to get you some content, I will be doing that. But again, player interviews are going to be a big one there. So we'll see who I run into, and hopefully we'll be able to get them on camera for you. But hopefully I'll be able to see one of you. So if you want to be on the other end of the camera here and say what you have to say about this game, I promise I'll ask you questions that produce interesting content for you. All right. Is there anything else that we got to go over before I get out of here? I don't think so. So draws, induce them. Let's talk about like, man, should I talk about like just the spiciness that people have towards draws as a little ending thing? Maybe I'll use that as a topic for the next video. All right, cool. Take it easy. cEDH Unhinged, Elijah Royal. Thanks for watching.